Disclaimer. To the Pharisees and Karens out there.
How dare you!
All guests on this show do not reflect the opinions of the host. The purpose of this show is to have interesting conversations, stretch our minds, and grow.
Not what we want!
If you are looking for an echo chamber, viewer and listener discretion
is advised.
You talk about extreme.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
Torches high.
Look at it from a different perspective.
Hey guys, what is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we are about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. I'm your host, Doc Brown, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. Hey, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the hero's journey. Be sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, and check out our social media banner down below at their various platforms. That would be much, much appreciated. Well, hey guys, have you ever just looked at the UFO phenomenon and the 1947 Roswell incident and the presidents? What do they know? What are they keeping from us? And ask these kind of questions to yourself. Well, if you have, I have a great conversation lined up for you tonight. I got a returning guest. This brother come on and blew people's minds. I honestly, it skyrocketed in my download numbers. It was a very, very popular episode. So I'm really, really grateful and thankful to have this man come back. But he's got a new book, and he tackles the topic of aliens. And this is called the Liberty Code. And I'd like to welcome back to the show, Tyler Gilreath. Tyler, thanks for coming back, brother.
Hey, I appreciate it. Always delighted to jump on here and talk paranormal, supernatural, UFOs with you. So looking forward to diving into this talk today.
Well, for those that missed our first episode, the Gate of the Gods, your last recent book, just go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, because we get new listeners and stuff all the time. Just introduce yourself and give everybody a little bit of a feel of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Tyler Gilreath, investigative theologian. I like to investigate, all of the stuff that you do here on this channel, undoubtedly, but I've got, 15 plus years in ministry, church ministry, and I saw a need for, some scholarship in this area to dive into it. And so I've got 3 books out, and if you don't mind a shameless plug, let me just kind of summarize my work very quickly. Gospel Over Gods is my first book. It is a chronological study of the supernatural war of the Bible from Genesis through the book of Jude. My second book was Gate of the Gods. That's the one that I believe we talked about last time on your podcast. It is an in-depth study in the book of Revelation, investigating the supernatural war in John's Apocalypse. In that book, I look at a lot of Babylonian threads that are sometimes not brought out, but I feel like are very important in unraveling the mystery. And, in this book, it's a little different, because I go back and ask the question, all the things that are being talked about in Congress. I mean, for example, going back to July 26, 2023, there was a House Oversight Subcommittee, national security hearing, essentially, on the topics of UAPs. And you had various whistleblowers such as David Grush, Ryan Graves, Commander David Fravor, who were testifying before Congress about the subject of UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UFOs as they are formally called. And from that, there was also a second hearing back in November of 2024. It was also a joint subcommittee hearing. And in that hearing, you had more credible witnesses coming forward, such as Dr. Tim Gallaudet. He was a retired Rear Admiral. You had Lou Elizondo, who essentially was the head man at ATIP. You had Michael Schellenberger, who has a lot of sources. He's an investigative journalist. And then lastly, there was Michael Gold, who, worked for NASA. And so those are two fundamental hearings where you have members of Congress coming together, asking the question, are we alone? And so when that began, I started asking the question, has this ever happened before? I mean, I know it has in the modern era. You get various hearings throughout the decades, the past 50 or 60 years. But I started digging and looking and just wondering, this topic of are we alone, has it ever come up? Was it in the 1800s, 1700s? And so I began doing some digging because from my study, no one had ever really touched this subject to this level. And so I was shocked when I began to dig and find what we're going to talk about today in this, podcast. That the answer is yes. Uh, some of the founding fathers did talk about this topic of are we alone, non-human intelligence, uh, even craft reports of craft and aerial phenomenon back in the 17, 1800s. And so I wanted to dive deep into this topic in the Liberty Code and talk about what's happening today, but also take it back and say, has this ever happened before? And so that is what this book primarily is all about. And I think your readers or my readers and your listening audience will find it, very compelling if they, get a copy.
Yeah, and also this is just a subject too that, speaking as a whole, broad brush, Christians don't really dive into. They kind of shy away from this thing. You got people like L.A.
Right.
Marzulli, but to most, everyday Christians, LA's too out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they don't even listen to him. So it's nice that Christians are entering this space. Well, I guess just take us on this journey, man. Wherever you'd like to start. But I know the founding fathers. I read your description on Amazon, and it talked about the founding fathers, even George Washington and Jefferson. Had encounters with these things. And now that's something that really interests me because I've done some research on the founding fathers and stuff, but didn't know about that.
Yeah. Before I get into the evidence-based research, there's always been some whispers of this. There's a legend, of Washington that goes back to essentially Valley Forge, 1777, 1778, where, Washington encountered some otherworldly being that pretty much showed him the future of America. And I'm not so sure that was a credible. We can't say that necessarily that was a credible, historical event. It seems to have been given legs in 1860 when it was printed by Anthony Sherman. So, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but there's just not enough evidence to say emphatically that it did happen. So, what I want to talk about today is not hearsay. It is not revisionist history. This is history that I believe our government does not want people to know. Okay. And so the first place I want to take you guys on this journey, everybody who's joining the podcast today, I want to go back to around 1796, just for a minute. There was a founding father who was very influential for his time. His name was David Rittenhouse. That may or may not ring a bell with you. He was not a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but he was very important. Let me explain. So Rittenhouse, he was a Swiss Army knife. I mean, colonial America and early America relied on David Rittenhouse for a lot of things. In fact, George Washington hired him on multiple occasions to make certain precision instruments for them, especially when they were trying to chart out all the territories. Rittenhouse was an astronomer. Okay, he built some of the early telescopes, uh, that we had in America. I believe also he was one of the first to track the transit of Venus in 1769. Um, and so Washington also there was a series of letters that were shared back and forth between Washington, Jefferson, and Rittenhouse. And in those letters, they pretty much all came to the conclusion that David Rittenhouse was the man for the job to fill the role of the director of the U.S. Mint. Okay, so he was the one that really is in charge of getting America's money in order, right in the very beginnings. And so I can't really explain in this short amount of time that we have how important he was, but he was extremely important. Well, tragically, Rittenhouse passed away, and it was such a hit for the country that there was an invitation that was sent out pretty much to all of the Congress, the Senate, Washington himself, and even foreign dignitaries came. Now, uh, I should also say this, that Rittenhouse was the functioning president of the American Philosophical Society. This is not a well-known group by most people in
He
modernity.
sounds like a Da Vinci guy, modern day
Yeah,
Renaissance man of
he
his time.
he really was. But the American Philosophical Society, if anyone wants to go down some rabbit holes, they have an archive, and you can look at all the things they talked about. Anywhere from astronomical signs to weather to crops to medicine. In modern times, we might say this is a high level TED talk, essentially. Um, and so he was the president of the American Philosophical Society when he passed. And it was that society that planned this eulogium or this memorial service to remember this great patriot. And so they sent out letters, like I said, to the Congress, the Senate, the House, and foreign dignitaries. In Washington, we know Washington was in attendance. And here's the date, December 17th, 1796. 6 months had went by. I believe he died back in June, maybe June 26, 1796. And so some months had passed. And they did this so that people could travel and get word and attend the event. This is, before a lot of the modern means of communication, transportation. And so they gave everyone plenty of time. Washington was there. And Dr. Benjamin Rush, he was tapped uh, and given the opportunity to basically, be the one that conducted the eulogium and the grand affair, right? And Dr. Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and so he was also an important figure in his own right. And in this eulogium, by the way, it was in a church building. I should say that it was on, I believe it was the First Presbyterian Church um, that was located on High Street there in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it was about noontime. And Dr. Benjamin Rush began to articulate and talk about all the musings and the accomplishments of Rittenhouse. But there was a couple of lines in there where Benjamin Rush read some quotes directly from Rittenhouse. I thought they were very fascinating, and I'll just, kind of share some of these with you. But essentially, he said, "How far the inhabitants of other planets may resemble man, we cannot pretend to say. Cease then, Galileo, to improve thy optic tube, and thou great Newton, forbear thy ardent search into the mysteries of nature, lest ye make unwelcome discoveries." So let's just let that sink in just for a minute. The government, I
Yeah,
think,
he's admitting that
yeah,
some of these scientific discoveries and stuff like that was given to them by, otherworldly things that look like us, man. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, he's hinting at a lot of things here, being a little ambiguous. But here's something else he says that he gets beyond just the possibility. He says, if their inhabitants, okay, the inhabitants are a word for biologics or or bodies, we might say. If their inhabitants have found it necessary to erect artificial fabrics of government, let us suppose they have not done it with so little skill. We will hope their statesmen are patriots and their kings have the feelings of humanity. Now, this was said where you had individuals such as George Washington in attendance. Andrew Jackson was there. Andrew Jackson was the seventh president of the United States. At the time, he was the representative for the state of Tennessee. You also had James Madison, who I believe was the fourth president. He was the representative for Virginia. You had Aaron Burr, who was the vice president under Thomas Jefferson. He was in attendance. And so, all of these figures were there and multiple future presidents. And they were all hearing the same thing in that church building at noon on High Street, the possibility, the what ifs that we are not alone in the universe. And a lot of people, Justin, have come to the conclusion that this is all just a product of sci-fi movies. This whole topic is just can be just summed up with Steven Spielberg and his creativity and his cinematic movies, right? And I think people would be shocked, and our own government would not want people to know that this has been a topic. What is happening now, where the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, you have former and current presidents weighing in on this topic. This has happened before. And so
nothing new is under the sun, right?
No, not at all. And so I was blown away. Why has no one talked about this? Why has this never come up in congressional hearings? Or why have representatives that are outspoken, such as Tim Burchett from Tennessee, from Knoxville? He's been very like a bulldog on this topic, pushing disclosure, transparency. Why hasn't he talked about it? And so I felt, this was very, very important. Just that alone is pretty transformational. And so that's one of the first events I talk about in the Liberty Code. I also talk about John Adams. John Adams was the pretty much the vice president under Washington. They didn't have the greatest relationship, but he became the second president once Washington was out of office. And in Chapter 2 of the Liberty Code, I talk about his private diaries, these extraterrestrial diaries, where he also speculates about the inhabitants of other worlds and the possibilities that we are not alone. And so that is the second president of the United States wrestling with these very ideas. And then I also mentioned Jefferson in Chapter 3. I get into Thomas Jefferson. He was a fascinating character. I really enjoyed learning a lot about Thomas Jefferson, and he also was a very brilliant individual. He spent in his childhood, over 12 hours a day studying, learning everything he could. He spent time overseas as a diplomat. He came back over, to the States, and obviously went on to become president of the United States. I want to also say this, just kind of shows you the level of his, intelligence. He also was the president of the American Philosophical Society, not during his presidency, but after. And you also had men such as Benjamin Franklin, who was also president of that society. So there's a couple of presidents from the American Philosophical Society that are very brilliant, brainy individuals, and Jefferson was one of them. But what I found was fascinating when it came to Jefferson. Essentially, Jefferson had two letters come across his desk um, that were UFO sightings. Okay. Um, Fascinating stuff. The fact that we were led to believe Roswell, 1947, was when it all started. Some even take it back to 1933.
Are you a hunter, a hiker, or just an outdoor enthusiast? Well, if you are, you know that good quality gear is hard to come by. And finding all-American made is like finding Bigfoot in the woods. Hence the name of Squatch Survival Gear. Head on over to squatchsurvivalgear.com. Use the code PLP10 for 10% off store-wide. Hey guys, it's no secret that every single day your dollar loses its value. If a man invested $1,000 in silver in the 60s, today that same $1,000 would have magically turned into almost $30,000. Silver and gold only continues to increase in value. If you have a 401k or money sitting in savings, that is just a number in a computer system that is one EMP or hack away from being deleted forever. I've recently teamed up with Cornerstone Assets and Metals and started investing in gold and silver myself. And I highly encourage the listeners, if you have money in savings just sitting there, invest it in hard, tangible assets. The same thing with your 401ks. Take a 20 to 30% cut of that 401k, that number in a computer system, and invest into hard, tangible assets that is proven to only increase in value. Be sure to check out the link in the description or the number on the screen, and be sure and tell them that Doc Brown from Prometheus Lens sent you. Torch is high, guys.
But that's not the case. I mean, that may be the case in, again, modernity. But what I've found is two letters written to Thomas Jefferson, and I'll share some of that with you, if you would like, that details what they saw. And it's very reminiscent of things that people are describing today. So one letter was, it was written from William Dunbar, and the event took place in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It took place June 30th, 1800. And he wrote this letter to Jefferson. Now, Jefferson read this letter out loud to the American Philosophical Society. We know that because of the online archive, okay, that I was able to go through and investigate. And here's what he says. It just starts off by saying a phenomenon was seen to pass Baton Rouge on the night of April 5th, 1800. He goes on to describe it. He says it was the size of a large house, 70 or 80 feet long. And then it says it resembled the figure 5 in plate 4. Now, we don't have that drawing. I thought this was very interesting. That drawing is nowhere to be found. It is suddenly missing from the archive. The fact that there was actual drawing of what this man saw, it's gone. It's not in the record for whatever reason. So
the guy that saw it drew it and included it in the letter?
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
The guy that drew it, saw it, drew a picture of what he saw, included it in the letter to Jefferson, and it's nowhere to be found. I have dug in every corner. It is not there. But essentially, he goes on.
That was the most important part. I mean, if he was going to protect anything, it would have been that, I would think.
Exactly. That was a key part. So if anybody could, come up with any evidence, I would love to see it. But I have looked everywhere, and it is not to be found. And I believe that's probably, by government intent. But he goes on to say that it hovered about 200 yards above, land. Okay. And he said that it was wholly luminous. It was crimson red. Okay. There's some great historical UFO sightings, very similar, even over a lot of our installation sites that retain uh, weapons of mass destruction. Okay, and essentially, this thing is said to have crashed in the letter. That actually came down and crashed, and it said that. Let me read this letter here. He said, when passing right over the heads of the spectators, the light of the surface of the earth was a little short of the effect of sunbeams, though at the same time, looking another way, the stars were visible, which appears to be a confirmation of opinion formed of its moderate elevation. He says that in passing, a considerable degree of heat was felt, but no electric sensation. Immediately after it disappeared in the northeast, a violent rushing noise was heard, as if the phenomenon was bearing down the forest before it. And in a few seconds, a tremendous crash was heard, similar to that of the largest piece of ordnance, causing a very sensible earthquake. He says, I have been informed that search has been made in the place where the burning body fell, and that a considerable portion of the surface of the earth was found broken up, and every vegetable body burned or greatly scorched. I have not yet received answers to a number of queries I have sent on, which may perhaps bring to light more particulars. So fascinating possibility that you had this house-sized object that for a while hovered over the earth the size of a house or larger and came crashing down. And we have no follow-up. What happened? What was discovered? We have no
Yeah, that
follow-up.
was my thing. It's like, what happened to the ship? You know what I mean? They talked about all the devastation, so obviously it wasn't there. It's just they seen the aftermath of the crash. That's what it sounds like.
Exactly. And so, Jefferson was reading this and to very important figures. And I'm sure there was follow-up, but we just don't have the follow-up. So that's the first one. Here, let me share a second one with you. This one's, I think, even more fascinating. So he got a second letter. I don't know if Jefferson was a UFO magnet or what, but he received a second letter. This was from two individuals. There are two witnesses, Edward Hansford and John Clark. This UFO sighting took place in Portsmouth, Virginia on July 31st, 1813. And they describe seeing essentially a large, it starts out as a ball of fire, as large as the sun. It says that this ball of fire then assumed the form of a turtle, and then it appeared to be agitated, and it descended obliquely to the west. It raised again, perpendicular to its original height. It then assumed the shape of a human skeleton, and then it assumed the form of a Scottish Highlander. So that pretty fascinating. I mean, you obviously you don't just have something prosaic going on, that you can explain away with some natural phenomenon. You have something shape shifting in the sky, and it was seen not by one but by two individuals. And
It makes me wonder if it's a plasma. You know what I mean? I recently talked with Dr. Greg Little, and he's got some theories on that. He talks about the electromagnetic spectrum, and that the Earth gives this stuff off, and it follows like a crack in concrete, basically, like all the friction and magnetic stuff going on. That it follows these fault lines, and where it finds a crack, it comes out. And that he was saying that that's like plasma balls of energy. And it was his theory that otherworldly or spiritual entities use these things kind of like doorways or portals, and they access them, and how they can change forms and things like that to appeal to the person that is observing them.
It's pretty fascinating.
You were talking about that. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, and that may be possible. Not really sure, but yeah, this letter came across Jefferson's desk, and if I'm not mistaken, this letter may be hanging up in um, Jefferson's basically museum, Monticello. There may be a copy hanging up there, um, but yeah, these are some of the things, right, that I found that were just really mind blowing and fascinating. The fact that their Congress, the Senate, presidents are talking about life on other planets, and John Adams has a diary that he talks about this stuff, personal diary, and then second president of the United States, then third president of the United States has unidentified anomalous phenomenon or UFOs and letters and reports that come across his desk. And so, these are things that I think need to be a part of the public domain, at least the public discussion. The public needs to know that this is not something that is just taking place in the past 50 or 60 years, but has been ongoing for a very long time.
Yeah, and honestly, all that stuff was fascinating, but what really stood out to me was that eulogy. That guy that said that basically, I mean, you said he invented, basically telescopes and was an astronomer and kind of like at that time, their version of a Da Vinci.
He was,
yeah. And basically, the way I heard it is that these otherworldly entities or whatever that look like us gives all this wisdom and knowledge and technology. And even going back to the Bible, the angels, every time they show up, they look like us.
Yeah.
They eat, they sleep, they drink. And, it even tells you to, be kind to strangers because you could be entertaining angels unaware.
Right.
All that stuff just clicks when I heard that. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. Exactly. And, I track my fascination with this topic all the way to present day. And, I go through a lot of the other presidents, such as, Nixon and, JFK. JFK, how JFK touches this topic. I don't know if you've done a lot into this or not, but
no, I was hoping you touch on JFK because all the conspiracy stuff surrounding him. He talked about the secret people, the shadow people pulling strings and all that stuff. And it was shortly after that speech, he was taken out. And so, I definitely, if there's any kind of thing correlated with him, I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. So let me kind of lay the groundwork for JFK. So, JFK, when he came on the scene, he was full of ideas. He was an inspiration to a lot of people. And he had different ideas. And he found himself clashing with the CIA, the Central Intelligence Community. And let me kind of lay out this timeline and how it escalated to potentially being why JFK died or was assassinated. So let's go to 1961 just for a minute. This is there's a famous UFO event called the NATO UFO event in 1961, and essentially there were 50 unknown objects, and that is one term that UFOs were once called, unknowns. But 50 unknowns were basically detected on radar moving from the Soviet Union towards Europe. And this is really could be potentially catastrophic. You're in the middle of this Cold War, situation, and Everybody's tense and everybody's fingers on the trigger. And so when these 50 unknowns were seen leaving the Soviet Union headed towards Europe, people were thinking, is this an aerial assault? Are we under attack? Are you sending this? Or no, you're sending this, right? Both sides are pointing their fingers. What is going on? Well, as mysteriously as they came, the 50 unknowns disappeared over the Norwegian Sea. And this event left JFK with a gut-wrenching feeling about how fragile peace was during the Cold War. Okay, so that was February 1961. Let's go to April 1961. You have this infamous, Bay of Pigs event in Cuba, where the CIA and JFK disagree on sending air support and how that was a failed mission and fiasco and an embarrassment to our country. And so that began to splinter the relationship that the executive branch had within itself. The president, JFK, and then the CIA, from that disagreement on how to handle that terrible situation. And so, fast forward to June, same year, June 4th, 1961, you had this Vienna summit where JFK goes and meets with the Soviet premier Nikita Khrushchev. And they developed a friendship and a relationship, a partnership where essentially JFK wanted to have a joint space program with the Soviets. That's how close they got following this Vienna summit in 1961. But what was surprising to JFK is that Nikita Khrushchev told John F. Kennedy about a secret American operation called Operation Palladium that the Americans were doing to the Russians. And essentially what they were doing is they were sending fake signals to lull them to sleep so that they would get used to seeing these mysterious ghost signals on radar to where we could fly our bombers in undetected. And this was psychological warfare, essentially, is what is going on here. And this is where, the CIA is becoming all too powerful, where you have, going back to Eisenhower, essentially, a lot of presidents feel like the CIA is a law unto themselves, and though it falls under the executive branch, it acts independently of the president. And so this was terrible news to JFK, the fact that he did not have control over the CIA. And his distrust in the CIA continues to grow even more, right? Okay, so that was June 4th, 1961, Vienna Summit. 24 days later, JFK gets back to the United States. He writes a letter to then CIA Director Allen Dulles. And he says that he wants a report and he wants to be briefed on all psychological warfare plans and MJ-12, and he wants it now. And MJ-12, for those of you who may be listening and are not familiar with that group, it was a group called the Majestic 12. M standing for Majestic, and then J standing for Jehovah, like Jehovah God. The 12 was emblematic of the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles. And so this was a secrecy group within elements of the CIA, for the most part, that saw themselves as the gatekeepers of UFO knowledge. Okay. Again, many believe there was an executive order given in the 50s that basically obfuscated this information away from future presidents because they thought it was too sensitive. And so MJ-12 was a part of this psychological warfare operation, Operation Palladium, and pretty much the know-it-alls to the UFO secrets of America. And Kennedy wanted answers. So I have this letter, and included in the book. And by the way, I should say this letter was a part of the Majestic 12 documents. They have come under scrutiny over the years. It is not written by one individual. These are a compilation of documents that have surfaced over several decades, and some are more credible than others. But I believe the documents related to JFK, written to CIA directors, we're going to talk about another letter in just a minute, they are accurate and they did happen. And so JFK demands answers. And essentially, we know this meeting took place because when President Trump revealed the first time the first batch of JFK documents, not the recent one, but the original one in his first term, we gained access to the calendar and the schedule and the diary entries of CIA Director Alan Dulles. And what we discovered, for those who have read those documents, is that Alan Dulles met with JFK, I believe twice on that day, further proving the fact that, this conversation happened. Okay.
Third-party confirmation. You can't get no better evidence than that.
Third-party confirmation. Exactly right. And so that is key to this whole discussion. June 28th, 1961, two declassified Alan Dulles diary entries that reveal he did meet with Kennedy twice that day, the same day that this infamous letter was written to Alan Dulles from JFK. Okay, so that's confirmation in my mind. That happened. Okay. Very quickly, Alan Dulles, he was not going to give away the goods. He ended up being removed out of office. JFK had had enough, and Alan Dulles was gone. Okay, he's no longer acting head of the CIA. So fast forward about 2 years, there's a new director named John McCone, and there was a letter written on November 12th, 1963. Okay, where he writes a similar letter to the new director, and essentially this letter, he's very specific. He says, "I want a classification review of all UFO information, of the known targets and the unknown targets, and I want them now." The CIA was not going to give that information to JFK. Just a few days later, like a week later, JFK was assassinated after he demanded answers from the CIA that he was to have this information. Now, let me bring up a third document that's important to this whole discussion. There is a document in the Majestic 12 files called the Burned Memo. Okay, it's believed the Burned Memo was written fall of 1963. We have this memo because it was recovered by an officer. It was essentially put in the vault of then CIA head of intelligence, James Jesus Angleton. Okay, he was a spy master for the CIA. He was a member of this Majestic 12 group. And in this letter, in this document, this burned memo, because it's literally burned, okay, the man that saved it snatched it out of the fire, evidence that he wanted the world to know. It says that Lancer cannot continue to pry us or know this information. Lancer was the Secret Service name for President Kennedy. So I'm summarizing here.
Wow. So even the president had like a code name.
He did, yeah. His name was Lancer. And this document, this burn memo, said that JFK's got to go. We can't tolerate this anymore. Okay? He has to be handled. He has to be taken out, killed. And this was fall of 1963, the same time period that he was assassinated. So, you know, let me just first say this is all fascinating and amazing that, you know, all of this documentation is there. It is historically accurate. It is not supposition. But let me go down the rabbit hole a little further and talk about this figure, James Jesus Angleton, that had this document in his safe, in his vault. We now know, because of the new declassification from President Trump on the JFK files, that James Jesus Angleton did in fact recruit Oswald for his own purpose. And it's a little ambiguous why he recruited him, but that he was under surveillance for 2 years prior to the assassination. We know that because there was a stack of documents on James Jesus Angleton's desk about Oswald, and he was tracking his whereabouts in New Mexico and other places, or down in Mexico and other places. Just a few days before Kennedy would be shot in that motorcade event, James Jesus Angleton, the spy master of the CIA, downgraded Oswald's threat level agency-wide. And why that matters is because if his threat level had remained at a super high level where it was, President Kennedy would not be allowed to get anywhere close to Oswald. Okay?
Yeah, he'd been monitored a lot better. It's like they were like, okay, he's no longer a threat. We don't have to follow him anymore.
Exactly. So why did James Jesus Angleton, the one that held a document in his safe that said Lancer has to go, why did he suddenly downgrade Oswald days before Kennedy was assassinated?
It's like he was smart. He was covering his tracks. You know what I mean? It's like he got an order from above him to do this thing, and he did it, and then he kept that as like a receipt in case they turned on him, and he could, you know, kind of clear his name, so to speak.
Exactly. I mean, you know, a lot of people say that this new document dump was a nothing burger. It is not a nothing burger. You just have to know what you're looking for, and you have to dig. Now, there is no, what I would say, a truly smoking gun, but you have all this evidence that if you put it together, it is kind of like a smoking gun. I mean, you have, you know, years of JFK demanding answers on the UFO topic, and the CIA pushing back to the point that they're saying he needs to be killed, taken out of the picture. Lancer has to go. And you have all this evidence that is mounting. And to me, it says that at the very least, JFK was assassinated for pushing the UFO topic and transparency. Now, there may have been some other issues with that, and I believe there was. I believe it was the UFO topic mixed with the fact that JFK wanted to have a joint lunar program with the Soviets. He also wanted us to denuclearize and wanted them to denuclearize, and the CIA was not having it. And so it was kind of a perfect storm for JFK that seemingly, you know, it looks like the CIA took him out. And so I talk about all of this.
You had the drug allegations, you know, the amphetamine use and him running around with Marilyn Monroe, and he was kind of a ladies' man, playboy. So if we think of the Epstein stuff, what do? People of power entice people with women and drugs and all these things to incriminate them, to have, you know, leverage and like put them on a leash and make them do what they want. So, you know, maybe the CIA thought that he was a high risk to be compromised and used as a foreign asset, you know, kind of like a, what do you call it? The lesser evil is to get rid of him kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think they felt backed into a corner. He wanted a joint partnership. He wanted to denuclearize. He wanted UFO transparency, and the CIA wanted none of those things. There is a Marilyn Monroe document uh, in the MJ12, Majestic 12 documents that indicates she might have known, JFK might have told her some things about the UFO topic, and that she was basically threatening to reveal the information, and that may have ultimately led to her death as well. So the UFO topic, from my investigation into all of this, is held at a higher classification than weapons of mass destruction. Okay, that is how tight this lid is on the mason jar. It is truly, uh, truly inaccessible for a lot of presidents. Now, uh, that is at least in the past. Okay, now moving forward, um, I believe we are living in a new day, a new era, where President Trump said, um, when he was running for reelection, the most asked question was about the UFO topic, and he has promised transparency on that. Now, we may or may not get that. I mean, we're not getting a lot of transparency on the Epstein documents. We have gotten transparency on a lot of the JFK documents, and then Martin Luther King documents, RFK. All of that will undoubtedly come out, but um, so we'll see what happens. I mean, but what's happening right now is pretty important. You have uh, members of Trump's cabinet who are supposedly, allegedly being briefed into this topic. The most important one is Marco Rubio. He is apparently the one that has the most knowledge about this topic, and he holds several high positions right now. Maybe future president. We'll just have to wait and see if he runs or not. Um, but it's getting very interesting. Jaime Assad came out several years ago, and I include this in the Liberty Code. I don't know if your audience can see this or not, but I included in the Liberty Code. He came out. He was a pretty much in charge of Israel's space program, highly respected individual. And a few years ago, he came out and said, uh, President Trump knows about UFOs, the crash retrieval programs, and the non-human intelligence. And essentially, he made some even bigger allegations that said that there is this treaty in place, or galactic federation or whatever, and Trump knows about it, and he's just keeping it quiet. So that was a big deal when that came out. I mean, that was a respected individual in Israel who had been in that role for eons, saying that we and President Trump knows about this. So we'll see what happens with it. But the Liberty Code is a pretty much a chronological investigation into this, from George Washington all the way to President Trump. And so, if you want to know what the presidents know about UFOs, what they really know about UFOs, I do my best job in investigating that and bringing out a lot of new information to the surface. So, yeah, I've enjoyed the
Man,
study.
yeah, that's awesome because, of course, I don't want you to give away the whole book. I want these guys to, get your book and check it out and read these things. But just the stuff you've told me already is already just mind blowing to me. And even with Trump too, I mean, you got to think people, when they make mistakes, they learn from them. So the CIA, had this secret group looking into these things. Well, a former president found out about it and gave him a lot of trouble. That so much so that allegedly, they had to take him out. So if that is the case, moving forward, would they not be more secretive, or would they just, throw out some little, what's the word I'm looking for? Not important breadcrumbs or disinformation to feed the population and the people to keep them off their trail. But even if Trump does know, he knows what happened to Kennedy. So
he
he's
knows.
going to keep his mouth shut and play the game right because he don't want to be unlifed either.
That's very true. I mean, let me kind of. I know we're running short on time, but let me kind of reveal why I think the government is so hesitant to roll this out. Okay, first of all, they've been gaslighting the American people for years. Nothing to see here, move along, citizens. They have ridiculed anyone who's talked about it. They have denied. So that's obvious. But there's some other peripheral things that are major factors in all of this. So um, one is the fact that the United States government allegedly has a crash retrieval and reverse engineering program and has had it since the 1940s. Um, and from that, we began to study this to try to reverse engineer it, right? And it's stated that we kind of hit a wall, our government hit a wall with it. And so what they did is they started loaning out some of these craft secretly to uh, aerospace companies, private aerospace companies such as Lockheed Martin. Um, and that they hoped that they could do something with it because our own government wasn't really getting anywhere. And so, what we were worried about, our government was worried about, is that we were going to get left behind. There is a space race. Other countries have their own reverse engineering craft retrieval programs. I list all of them in the Liberty Code. And each country is racing to figure out this technology because who can ever harness the power of electrogravitics or anti-gravity wins the game. And so they began giving this to private aerospace companies and not other companies. So here's, some side effects if you just come out with all this. Well, then you're going to have lawsuits all over the place. Well, you gave an advantage to this company and they developed these technologies and got these patents and made all this money. And what did you do for us? You didn't tell us about none of this. You didn't give us, you know, fair technology or a chance at, making derivative tech from this. And so you're going to have lawsuits, left and right. Um, it's, also going to, affect a lot of people's faith. We know that was a concern originally. There was various reports and investigations into this by the government where they began to war plan, what would disclosure look like? Well, what would it affect? And something else that affect besides faith was the world economy, because the world economy is run on petroleum, oil, and gasoline. And if you have the power of electrogravitics, you don't need that anymore. And so that pretty much runs the world economy to a large degree, right? And so that's a deep concern as well is, will the whole world just go to pot and, chaos be everywhere financially in the stock market and whatnot. And so, that's the concern. Um, and then you have the fact that if we announce that we have this, then other countries will probably ramp up their espionage, trying to, see what kind of secret tech, black budget projects we have to figure that out. And so it's almost as if they're wanting to keep it private, but they also know the cat's kind of out of the bag. And so maybe the best thing to do is just ignore it, pretend like we don't know what you're talking about, and maybe they'll go away. Maybe they'll stop asking. But I think we've reached the point where, with our technology, with our connectivity around the world, we get information just like that. It's going to be really hard to put the cat back in the bag. And so I see disclosure happening very soon. I'm not a date setter. I don't know anything, but from what I'm hearing, best case scenario 2027, worst case scenario 2034. Who knows if that's right or not? But if that's the case, that's pretty soon. And what they're supposedly doing is slowly rolling out they're trickling this information out, letting us get used to this idea that we are not alone. Disney just put out a children's movie called Elio, where this boy asked the universe to take him somewhere else, and aliens come and abduct him. I mean, they're slowly getting this trickle effect out. You have
Desensitizing the population.
desensitizing the population. You have another very important group in all of this called Skywatcher. Skywatcher is made up of former crash retrieval program individuals, people that have retrieved UFOs. Okay. These individuals have come out. Jake Barber he's one of the pilots that has retrieved this egg at his time in the program. And so basically you have this team of former government officials who have learned how to summon or invite these UFOs, both with machine-based calling, with different frequencies, and also what they call psionics, or people that have certain abilities that can tap into this, and they invite them to come. And so they have laid out 8 or 9 different craft. You can go look on their YouTube channel now. It's very well done, very scientific based. And they have come out and said that the government is basically working with them. They are not the government, but the government is working with them, I believe, to slowly roll this out to the American public. So, we are on a course for disclosure. Even Steven Spielberg has a movie coming out called Disclosure. I don't know if y'all know that or not, but it is going to be a big movie, and many people believe that there is a lot of it's not just sci-fi. There's a lot of intentional messaging that will be in that movie Disclosure from Steven Spielberg. So there's a lot coming down the pipe on this, and I think we've only scratched the surface. I really do.
Yeah, and honestly, to kind of correlate what you just said there with a recent conversation I had at the time of this recording, it's been released. It was released Monday, but it was with Jacob Nordengard, and he's wrote several books, but the one we were talking about was titled the Temple of Solomon. But he talked about Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and the Theosophist movement, and that's kind of what he was saying. He said that Alice Bailey said way back in the day that this in her book, what was it, the externalization of the hierarchy, that they are these other entities, other worldly things communicating with select people and giving them information and knowledge, and basically told her that 2025 was the beginning of the rollout of the externalization of the hierarchy, and that basically, like the frog in the boiling water, the desensitization, that they'll put their feelers out and see how the people react, and if they react accordingly, then they will present themselves, in a couple years or something like that. They'll give it time, but they'll just kind of slowly desensitize the population. And if they are receptive to it, then they will reveal themselves. And I thought that was pretty telling, to say the least. And he was telling a story about a guy, I think his last name was Clark, but he wrote a fiction novel way back in the day. And it was the storyline of this Theosophist, Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey narrative, that these aliens race comes down, presents themselves to the leaders of the world, gives them information and technology, and this technology is a surveillance thing, and it's gathering information on the people and learning everything they can about them. And they said that but they wouldn't show themselves. But they said they were going to give them 50 years. After giving them all this stuff, they're going to give them 50 years, then they're going to reveal themselves. And basically, they were just using that 50 years to gather all kinds of intel, and all the technology they were giving us was to surveil us. And that in this fiction book, but what happens right before the 50-year rollout is they notice something is happening to the children. And the children are like stuck in this like dream state, and the parents can't communicate with them. and they're stuck in this matrix system, and they all develop a hive mind.
Yeah, that's wow.
All the kids today, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I certainly do. Something to connect with what you said. So there is a famous UFO experiencer named last name Bledsoe, and
Chris Bledsoe.
yeah, Chris Bledsoe, and he came out and said he's been visited by the lady. He calls this feminine, otherworldly being called the lady. That Easter 2026, when the star of Regulus is aligned between the eyes of the Sphinx, a new knowledge will come upon humanity. So that kind of goes along the timeline with what you're saying. You know that, and many believe that the drone fiasco, the drone swarms over New Jersey, and throughout different military sites over the past several years, that our own government may have been putting drones in the air to try to mask orbs or different phenomenon that people were seeing to try to confuse the people. And so, if that's the case, then you do have an intensification of contact, so to speak, that may be building up to this 2026, 2027, unveil event, right? So we are in for an interesting next several years, to say the least.
Yeah. What a time to be alive. You know what I mean?
Right. That's exactly right.
Well, Tyler, man, thank you so much for coming on and blowing our minds with this stuff. I have to get this book now because I know we just had an hour conversation. You might have scratched the surface on maybe 3 chapters of this book. So I definitely want to know more. But before we go, let everybody know where they can find you, your content, your books, if they're intrigued and want to know more.
Yeah, they can go to Amazon. My books are there. The Liberty Code is the newest book, How the Founders' Secret Writings Expose the UFO Agenda and the Coming Alien Crisis. I do have an author page on Facebook, Tyler Gilreath, investigative theologian. So you can connect with me on that as well. So I appreciate the attention everybody gave to this podcast, and always love coming on the show, man. I mean, it's you do a great job. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, man. The pleasure is all mine. I love these conversations and love learning new stuff. And every time you come on, man, you are a well-researched guy and very well-spoken. I always learn a ton when we interact. So I'm definitely down to interact whenever you have the time.
Yeah.
Brother. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it.
Guys, be sure to check out his stuff. I'll be sure to get in contact with him, get some of those links, get you a link to the book on Amazon and all that stuff, and try to get as easy as I can for you for some one-click knowledge nuggies, guys. But hey, just remember, until next time, the difference between the known and the unknown is the journey. So, good journey, guys.